Alright, so we'll start by cleaning up our bullet decal object script. Actually, I think it's pretty cleaned up already. We can go to the constraints weight modifier, and I'm sure we've got some things we can improve, especially the for each loops in this script. So we're gonna change this into a for loop. Here you go. Here you go. So int I equals 0. The same normal thing we do with for loops for going through each element of the list. Now copy the same code from there, and instead of using an obj, which was the reference, we're gonna use it at the index we get. So just replace everywhere with this thing here. So here you go with I at the index I. So we'll get the correct element in the list to assign things to, like getting the component of I custom constraint or the rig constraint. And of course, if we don't get it, then we must let them know. And we can delete that for each loop now. That the for loop will do it for us. Similarly, in the update function, we've got two for each loops. We can replace them both using a for loop. Of course, we'll need two for loops in this case as well. Same thing, but this time we're going to go to the rig constraints list. And again, we're going to go to the index of I when we have to assign or get something. Similarly, for the custom constraints, okay, and then just add the braces for the for loop. Put the same code in there and just get the one as the index I. Alright, so the next thing is to just remove those two for loops. And the code is pretty much optimized than it was. I know that for loops are cheaper than for each loops. Maybe we can improve that later though, a bit more. So let's move on to the mass rotation target script here. Yeah, so we also have these following stuff there. I think the mass rotation to target is pretty okay, but the follow scripts need a few improvements. So let's see where they're all used. Right here, I'm just going to copy that component so I can rename these as when I created it, I did not give them the underscore names. And if you haven't made it, then make it as well. This script is very useful. I made it actually in the previous video, right? You did not follow the naming conventions. There you go. So just remember the last one used it. Now we also need to edit this script, remove all those useless transforms and delete them as well. Save that out. I'm gonna remove the usings that are not useful. And then in this script, we can see we can actually simplify this using the set position annotation. It's also cheaper than the assigning of both of them in the same area, you know. Make that simpler as well. And yep, that's it for that script. Now the late update one, I don't think it needs anything else. Yeah. Actually in this script I forgot to remove this serialized as stuff. So just gonna see where this is all used up. Maybe it's not even used anywhere. Let's hit find references. Oh, actually it's used everywhere, but it's not assigned anything by default. So we can remove that, doesn't really matter, because our script will do that. Remove the start function, as that's not a good thing to keep when it's empty. And the useless usings, of course. All the start functions that we have put, which are empty, Unity says we should remove them, so I'm going to remove them out. Okay, another one script which I have added, and I forgot to add it inside. You can make this one as well. It's the follow transform smooth object script. I'll just add those to this. I mean the naming conventions as well, Arduino, and of course use the set position and rotation instead of the direct assignments of the position rotation. Alright, just gonna then, I think, yeah, pretty long. Just delete those usings and close it out. So I think we're done with the following section. Let's go to the instance based. And right here, I think everything is already alright. These seem pretty optimized. Nothing really something that we could say is going to give us any problem. I'll just add a summary to the get cinemachine drain function. Also, let the person who uses this function know that we cannot call this all the time because it uses get component. And here we are going to actually change this from a string to a hash and hash it using the animator.string to hash. There you are. I also wanted the trigger name because in this one we have assigned it directly, which is not a good practice. And we actually needed it for that, not for the interact message. Alright, we get the hash also correctly then. Just a few comments to make something more simple and easier to understand. There you are, and for the can interact function that we added. Alright, so that's the gate script. Let's move on. And I think we don't need this in this interface, and also here we don't need it, but for this one we do, so just keep that there. So let's move on to the gun holder animated script. And here we can see we're using two functions, and they both assign the position and the rotation while they're both called the same place. So I'm going to make a new function and comment out these two functions, which is going to be more optimized than this one. So this function is going to assign the position and the rotation at one time using the set local position and rotation function in the transform, directly assigning the same values that we were assigning originally. So I'll delete those two called of the function which are now not used. Here we are using the new vector 3, which I would not want to use, so I'm just going to change that. And instead just assign the move input dot magnitude directly. Because if you see, I think it's the same thing, especially when you're just passing in 0 on the vector 3 as well. So we're not using new anywhere in any looping functions anymore. I'm just going to add a comment for the local position and rotation assignment. Alright, so we're done with the gun holder. Now in the bullet decal, just remove those using collections from everywhere where we can see them. They've not been used in the player model. Here just add an events instead of the reloading region. Reloading is anyway removed as it was obsolete. Then if you have any start functions which are doing nothing, make sure to remove those as well. And just a comment to let them know you're getting the player. Over here, every time this is called, we are actually calling get components, so we just cache a reference. Even though it's not called all the time, it's just called when you swap the weapon. But it's optimized that you do this. Cache the reference, and then you use it every time. There you go. So now you just set the text to the message. Okay, cool. Let's save and get out of this. Remove the using of that. The weapon is so, well, actually that was pretty okay as well. So let's have a look at the unused obsolete section and make sure we are not using anything of that. If we are, we're just going to delete everything. So I want to delete this folder. There you go. Just right click, delete it. A problem I noticed in the player UI script, we need to do get component and children on the interact UI, not on the player UI, because the text is not a child of our player. And this was my testing that I was doing. I'll remove that eventually. And then if you're concerned to have any issues with that, because it was literally just a comment. I'm going to add a new function in the scope effect manager, the onClicked enter function. Just paste the same code in there, but we'll call the onClicked exit handler instead. And I want to remove that check, which kicks us out. I'm going to make this simpler by making it short if, but I'll change it even simpler by just assigning the render camera to a question mark. And actually, this could be directly assigned to this as true and false is what it returns. Unclipped exit is called over here, so same place, we'll just call the unclipped enter and just shorten the affair as well. Short if like that also, but I think it's better not to do that. I'll make that easier to understand by just using these simplified false null checks, true checks. There you go. remove the trues and invert the make a statement if you want to false. Just simplify that. So we must make sure we don't call these to get global volume and this is machine brain more than once. Or I mean looping, because see, you just get component in the actual instance. So there you are, we're using only once in start. I'm gonna create a new function. This function is going to do a bit of camera handling. So there you are. I'm gonna call this something. I think we should call the handle cameras. Put in the cameras in the machine and this station. So the settings of the cinemachine brain and the rotation of the camera that we have. The wignet as well. So just change the names that it also includes effects. Then another function called handle scope system, and this will just take all of this crazy if statements on top of if statements that we've written that handle the clipped exits, events, and everything else in the update. So much simplified, and in here I'm going to make this simplified on the onShoot function. We want time multiplier. Here I'm just using a magic number, so I just want them to allow themselves if they want to. So it's the delay time multiplier, which is by default to 1.25, and this was a manual value I inputted, I assigned actually, but if anybody wants to change it, now I want them to be able. So there you are. And simplify these out. Checks for the aiming. I think that the ISO scope should be assigned by the on-aim exit and the on-aim handler, not by any other code that is supposed to execute it. So I think that wherever we are supposed to call these two functions, we are assigning the scoped state. So I think it's better to just do it once inside both the functions instead of writing duplicate code again and again. So I'm going to comment it out where it's being set and wherever we can replace it with just that function. I mean, it's already been put there in my testing area actually had that. So now on the on-name exit, we'll assign it to false. And on the on-aim, we'll assign it to right at the bottom, yeah, so true. So that would mean that when we on-aim, the scoped state is updated. And we also want to enable the wignet effect. So that's by going into the active and assigning it to true. And just fix that out. Remove the scope comments. And shorten the if wherever we can. We actually don't need that because I think the change vignette color already enables it for us. So whenever we have to change it, it will make sure it's already enabled. So I'll comment this out here as well because we just want to enable it when we are supposed to change the color. Right. And if we are not the current weapon, we just disable it. Of course, only once. We not continuously do that. I'm not really gonna assign the vignette state, because if you do that, any other scoped objects, the scope system will just keep on disabling, and another one would not be happy with that, because it would again be able to show its own vignette effect. So we just do that. We'll just add a new check for is clipped as well. Yep, that's it. And as you can see, everything works just like it was. Scope is enabled, clipping is working, and we can scope in our scope view. I can swap the weapon, and yes, everything did work as expected. So we remove the usings which are not needed and just reposition the usings by the like. And I think we have removed all the, yeah, so this code right here is no longer needed. So I'm also going to shorten these ifs as they're now one-liners. And over here, we can remove this as it's not used. Go through each of the comments here as well. Delete that. And we've come to where I was testing my stuff, so we can ignore that. Finished. Save it out, and let's move to the heat effects manager, which uses a for each loop, which is not good. We want to use for loops instead of for each loops. So just the simple setup that we do when we want to loop through a list or an array. But now we'll have to use the index instead of a reference and assign it based on the list's index. Using that and giving it a new material. Okay. Let's define a float for the heating amounts mapped to lerp speed and use that for the lerping. Here we're using a for each loop. We'll change it to a for loop. Again, we're supposed to loop through each of the lists, each of the TP datas. The same code we can use, but just have to use the list with the index. Everything should work. Now this is a shaded property, so we can use hashing. It does support the name ID, so I'm going to do that. Define the hash also right here in this area. Actually, I would like to add some tooltips to the tip renderer, and that's it. For tooltip for the shader, also the name ID. And no, that wouldn't really matter because we're using a custom editor inside the actual heat effects manager. Let's see. So we'll just assign it to 0 to see what happens. It was not read only. Oh, that read doesn't matter, I guess. I'll just add the tooltip and move out of it. Actually, just remove that as well, because it would not update this, because that was in my custom editor, and the custom editor had direct string names, so no problem. You can even keep it public. It anyway has to be assigned on the start for each of the datas. Its name ID has to be assigned using shaded or property to ID and passing in the actual IAM data at index name, and then use that ID instead of the name that we were using originally. So I'll define a new color, which is the heating color, instead of caching one every time in the loop. Just keep that there. Simplify it much more. Make the if short. Again, we are using this thing, but there is no ID, and that's more cheaper. So I'm going to define an ID for this one as well. I'll assign it to a new property ID of this name. I'll get the ID and then use that there instead of the name. Remove that and save and get out. Let's move the projectile script. Right here, everything seems pretty okay, except that we should destroy afterwards. I don't know why I did that. And we can shorten this if as well. I'll remove the usings that are not used. Move on to the weapon-based class. So right here, just remove one of the usings that was giving faded effects. And right here, everything seems okay already, except we can now make it shorter by using direct instead of checking for true and false. Okay, check that as well simply. Here also. And I think we can define a private string for the shoot trigger, the name, because right now we're using direct reference, which is not good. I mean, strings need to be changed from them just in case they want to. Otherwise, they'll be constrained to having set it to some shoot. So I'll also change it for the reloading. I'll define an int first for the shoot trigger hash, and then for the reload trigger name hash, and then the actual reload trigger name, which is reload. And then on the start functions, I'm just gonna assign them. I'm gonna assign their hash IDs based on the names using animator.string hash. There you are. Now we got the hash IDs. You can use them instead of the names. That's all my custom editors and windows that we did the past. So that's it. We're not assigning the position, otherwise we could assign both together. It's only rotation, so no problem with that. So all this code that was being done there is now being done here, which we have done already. And I would like to actually have a direct reference to the projectile, not a game object, because you can see I just directly call get component right after that. So when instantiating, I'll get a reference directly to it. Simplify that if. I guess that would be almost the end, except right here, the last thing is we're using add component here. So instead, we will have to use a spawn mag, which is going to be an instantiate of a prefab. Unit says adding component in real time is really expensive because it has to check for duplicates if it has to disallow multiple component, and if it can even be, it has required components, then you have to add those as well. And then for those, he has to check as well. So instead, just spawning a prefab is much better and easier as well. So there you are. I'm just going to make a simple instantiate code with the correct position and rotation. And the parent can be null. Yes. And I think we don't really have to do anything because now the mag must have the rigid body and everything that you'll add to it. So we can just directly instantiate without any reference to it even. Just give it the function call. And remove that code. Because we can instantiate a clone of the mag, which will have the rigid body and everything already. and the actual mag doesn't really have that. It's just a child of the actual weapon anyway. I'll shorten the audio clip play if and else statement. This function is really useful for any animation to play an audio clip. Okay, so I guess that should be enough for the weapon base. Let's see if we have any things still. Yeah, we can simplify the if. I think we'll fix this later. Like the on interaction should not be called when setting the current weapon to false, but we have to do that to keep the scope system working. But don't worry, in another video I'm gonna be changing this completely. Especially also we have two functions that are being called together, the controller reference and the current weapon. They should be one function. So I'll fix that later. For now, just continue. Simplify that out. Also here, this one can be simplified using a simple check and making the if short. That one can be simplified too, and that one too. We have this editor just so that we can have all the button that we need for the window to be activated. It fixed the issue just by inheriting the actual editor. So just here, this mag actually is being used. Okay, so now I'm going to duplicate just to show you for one weapon. The rest of the weapons you can do yourself. It's pretty simple, but it will take time for no reason. I wouldn't want to give another 30 minutes just to do the rest of the weapons. So instead, I will do it myself. I'll first create an empty game object for the AWM mag prefab. I'll copy and paste the magazine into this. It looks like this one has a bit of an issue. So I want to get this here. Actually, remove the rigid body from the magazine of the actual AWM, but just leave it in the box collider. So as you can see, I can see my mag. It's right here. And because the pivots are a bit out, it's on that right side. We can fix that using the rigid body center of mass, and the collider's offset. We'll need to do that. So only this weapon, which has a mag which is not perfectly aligned. I'm just going to create a folder in the prefabs for the weapon mag prefabs. I will copy and paste the box slider onto the actual parent, and I think it's not matching anymore. As you can see, the box slider is not visible. So what I'm gonna do is, well, zero the offsets. Those are pretty useful, I guess. I'll multiply everything by that scale that was written, actually, just to make sure the box is even visible. Just multiply all of these values by 44. Ah, something is wrong. Maybe do it manually because it's not working really. Yeah. Get the correct value, and that should be enough. Copy the read body and paste that here. Remove it from there and give it the correct layer weapon. So on this rigid body, all the settings are already done except the center of mass. So I'm gonna be copying and pasting the offsets of the box slider onto the center of mass. That's it. Now we have the mag with, I think, the correct offsets positioning. We can just drag it and make it a prefab and assign the mag prefab to the AWM weapon. Let's see how it goes. So I'll have to right click reload. There you go, the mag spawns correctly just like it was doing previously, but now it's a prefab that's spawned. And you can see too, because I already had one in the scene, so that's not any bug of spawning or anything. Alright, so it looks like our mag spawning and everything is working just as we wanted. However, they're not going away, so we make sure to add the decal destroyer. Will be mentioned after I come back, so I come back with all my prefabs done to tell you one thing I forgot, and that's the thing I forgot. I did not show you to add the decal destroyer onto all of your mag prefabs after you've made them. Okay, let's go ahead and do a quick fix, which is inside the weapon base. On the on traction, I just want to take in a player controller as one argument, and then call it with null and player control. Then in the scope effect manager, I'll call it with null, comment it out. Right here, we'll take in the player controller, and we'll check if the current weapon is current weapon, and then we'll assign everything correctly. So render camera enabled is current weapon. We'll check if it's not equal to null, the controller. Then we'll check if controller is aiming. Then we want to call on aim. Otherwise on aim exit. Then if it is null, that means that I guess, well, it was setting us to false. Then we will set the camera to be disabled, and we will check if it's scoped. If so, we want to aim exit. Actually, the on aim exit handler, not the aim exit one. Okay, that should be it for that. Save it out and come back, and everything should work as we want. So when you aim and you interact with something, yep, pretty okay, not very bad at all. So that's gonna be the end of this video. Make sure to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and please like to upload our videos. See you in the next video.